So, after burying my hatchet with GX last time, I feel like calming down for a little bit. Not that I need to take a break from Symphogear or anything, but that flurry of shit really exhausted me. Please be gentle with this one, Kaneko. Once more, first off I want to establish how I experienced this show, because AXZ actually kinda goes against the self-imposed rules for this series. I'm supposed to rewatch shows I've seen years ago and reevaluate my opinions on them, but when I originally wrote this script, I had just watched this season of Symphogear just after its run ended. At the time, 2 summers ago. There weren't any specific circumstances or something that made this anime really special to me either. While I was still excited as all hell for a new season of Symphogear, GX had put a damper on my love for the show and expectations I could put into this season to the point where I was pretty much unable to get my hopes up. As a result, I was, however, very pleasantly surprised with AXZ, for reasons I'll get into later, but it was also the least memorable of all 4 seasons of Symphogear so far, and it made little impact to me personally and to how I perceived the franchise. On top of that, I was now very solidly cemented into anime culture. I had watched roughly 50 shows and a handful movies to some degree, and was very active in online communities. Senki Zesshou Symphogear AXZ was the first season of Symphogear that I experienced as the person I am today. Okay, look, after the last 3 episodes, you're expecting some forcibly meme-filled retrospective of the first episode, but I'm gonna get down and dirty with this one. GX gave us some of the most over-the-top, definitive action for a first episode of Symphogear, not to mention any other anime. AXZ meanwhile opts for showing us how the public existence and usage of Symphogears and other heretical technology in warfare looks like, and it's just straight up fucking insane. Punching tank shells out of your way, taking the turrets of those shells' origin and using them as a fucking sledgehammer, noise mines, and airships like the one FIS used in G are now just out there, and it's fucking terrifying and awesome at the same time. In all seriousness, while I will always point you towards Radiant Force and GX for a bite-sized, condensed rundown of what Symphogear is to introduce people to the show, this opening scene shows off incredibly well just how much has changed in the world since the last season, while still catering to the balls-to-the-ceiling action and having the absolutely amazing soundtrack that fans of the show have come to know and love. As AXZ passes, we see it desperately try to fix what GX broke for many people, but story things first. After punching the shit out of a bunch of baddies in a rainforest, we are introduced to this season's villains, when Hibiki decides to finish this encounter by literally punching their massive, magically self-healing snake monster through multiple dimensions so hard that it can't use its magic self-healing. No, really. Following this, the cast is almost spirit bombed to death, and after a couple more encounters with the villains, it becomes apparent that the Lapis Philosophorum the villains are using is not only strong enough to beat Symphogears, but actually uses their power against them. It seems that Hibiki's Rock Cancer from G can be used as technically this season's seasonal power-up, allowing the users to negate the enemy's Faust Rope's power of practically siphoning phonic gain off the Symphogear users. Parallel to this, however, we discover Unison, which in story terms allows 2 Symphogear users that are in sync enough to utilize each other's phonic gain, and practically ends up being the real power-up here, and an excuse to give us some amazing duets with very unconventional pairings, as well as some of the straight-up craziest attacks of the entire show. Seriously? Change the Future is just... This brings me to the soundtrack, which, while still absolutely amazing, sadly enough is just as forgettable, at least to me. This season still has some fantastic songs, and it's overall a very good soundtrack, even to the point of Ignite versions being actually great to listen to this time around, but for me, only 2 or 3 of them really stuck with me after watching. The animation and art style, on the other hand, saw a massive overhaul. While it would still be accurate saying that they simply got an upgrade from last season, it would be a huge understatement. The animation I can leave at saying that it got just such a simple upgrade, but the art style, while still recognizable as very much Symphogear's, has changed to be more crisp, with higher contrast, slightly thicker line work, and much more striking colors. Don't get me wrong, again, this is still very much Symphogear, but in comparison to previous seasons, it's not just better, it's a more refined version, with a lot of thought poured into what made the show look good in the first place, which was then focused on to make that edge much better than it would have been with a straight upgrade like what we saw from G to GX. Now, the way AXZ does story is very interesting. While it's still its own thing, this season also makes itself the season of callbacks. AXZ plays off of earlier made points in Symphogear's history and uses them to tell its own story while also fleshing out said background story of this universe. The more cynical side of me would rather call it the season of retcons, but as a result of this callback-focused structure, we get a story that feels organic and well interwoven with previous seasons, though you could technically also blame this on the villains literally being Illuminati that are pulling the strings behind pretty much everything that has happened in the story until this point. And yes, you heard that right. The villains this time around are quite literally the Bavarian Illuminati and a couple of allied, once more near immortal, alchemists. While not the absolutely amazing, if somewhat cookie-cutter personalities of the autoscorers in GX, these are still some of the strongest villain figures Symphogear has to offer, both in story relevance as well as their personalities. With everything said and done, aside from the low memorability of everything, I can see few faults in AXZ for what it is. Clean up after GX. It tries and succeeds with flying colors to build a compelling story while forcibly using the alchemy left behind from the previous season. Of course, it's not all perfect. Adam Weishaupt, the mastermind of the Bavarian Illuminati, is only really there to be Mr. Evil, be naked, look good, and get punched really hard. Some of the plot is pretty contrived, and even this season's Gangnir Dato is quite forced. However, while I can't quite say why, I feel like I can look over all of those downsides this time around, because I enjoyed watching the show through these things, with these things, or even because of these things, rather than in spite of them. With AXZ, you can feel that after GX's success, Symphogear is trying to go back, rewind, and become what it once was, and that it's succeeding incredibly well given that, for the first time ever, another season was greenlit along with AXZ, giving it the opportunity to be the only season of Symphogear written entirely without having to keep its finality in mind. Of course, the motive to make money is still there, but that's going to be the case with any show. In AXZ, you can feel that passion again. The piece that particularly GX, at least to me, seemed to be sorely missing, and it really highlights how much of a miracle it is that we're still here. It's incredibly rare that adaptations that don't gain some serious traction get more than 2 seasons, and often the wait between those can reach many, many years. Symphogear was a failed passion project that, against all odds, pumped out 4 seasons in 5 years, and when I originally wrote this, the 5th season was already on the horizon, coming just a few months after. But all in all, after rewatching this season, I have to say that my opinion of Symphogear AXZ is considerably heightened, and that with the end finally in sight, I give it 5 out of 5 dick jokes, because even with 5 seasons under its belt, we all know that the length of something isn't the most accurate indicator of its quality.